being in sports is more than just a passion play. It's shown over time that sports is as resilient as you can get to economic conditions. We're an investment firm that is really focused on what we like to call the value chain of sports. If you're investing in the riskiest asset class, then your ability to succeed is a function of your ability to get in high quality deals. The access to those deals becomes a choke point. One of the vehicles is what's called an Evergreen fund that allows both accredited and non-accredited investors to invest.
Part of this was really to serve those individuals that would not normally have the opportunity. Now they have the opportunity. They don't need millions of dollars to get into this particular venture.
We're just trying to do our small part to make sure that we're creating a vehicle that folks can benefit from and create value from, but making sure that we educate at the same time. When you're someone that doesn't come from that type of wealth, doesn't come from that type of money, probably doesn't understand even the role of managing that money.
From overlooked prospect to Super Bowl champion, my guest today knows what it takes to turn obstacles into opportunities. Marques Colston didn't just defy the odds in the NFL. He's now doing the same in business, building pathways to wealth and opportunity for those who have been underestimated for far too long with his business, Champion Venture Partners. As an entrepreneur, financial advisor, and investor, Marques is leveraging his hard-earned insights to help others break barriers and build lasting success. In this conversation, we'll dive into the mindset shift, some strategies, and the lessons from the locker room to the boardroom that can help you level up, whether in business, investing, or in life. Listen in, enjoy. Marques Colston, welcome to the Everyday Millionaire Podcast. Thanks for joining me, man.
I appreciate you having me on.
So listen, Marques, we're going to talk a lot about your NFL career, and I want to hear all about it. You know, you have gone through the NFL, you now into business, CVP or Champion Venture Capital. What is Champion Venture Capital? Let's start there. What are you doing today when somebody asks you, what do you do? And, what are you telling them?
Sure. So that always seems to be the toughest question you get. So I'm the one of the founding partners of Champion Venture Partners, and we're an investment firm that is really focused on what we like to call the value chain of sports. And what we mean by that is most sports investment today is kind of the conversation starts and ends with owning teams that are in the NFL, MLB, NHL, MLS, and that again, that's kind of where the conversation starts and stops with team ownership. And what we know is that there's only a handful of people on earth that have the financial wherewithal to participate in those deals. Yeah. And they just are they're reserved for a very, very small fraction of folks. So what we do is we look at the sports ecosystem as a whole. And yes, we look at some of the team and league opportunities, but we also look at a lot of the businesses that kind of make up sports and make sports what it is. Everything from fan engagement technology to sports performance technology, sports medicine, hospitality, real estate, some media content. So we kind of talk about the picks and shovels of the sports industry. That's really our thesis. We're looking to invest in companies across the sports ecosystem and really build a pretty robust portfolio in doing so.
So you're looking at actually infrastructure perhaps, or, add-ons, something that plays into the whatever professional, primarily or all professional sports. That's the game.
Yeah, for sure. We're even starting to have some conversations in collegiate sports. I think there's a trend that we're starting to see kind of become more and more mainstream. So if you've been to a professional sports game or even a high level collegiate game recently, what you've probably seen is like these entertainment and these sports districts that are starting to pop up. Mm-hmm. And yes, you have the sporting venue and the game as the main attraction, but then you have retail and restaurants and hospitality around the stadium. Parking is kind of a business line of the whole ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And then you just have these different opportunities to kind of plug and play within that ecosystem that once you have fans, they're captive. there's an opportunity to create different types of experiences, different types of engagement opportunities. So like those sporting districts are really a microcosm of our investment thesis and our strategy.
So give me, for context, this is really interesting and it's something brand new to me. So, I'll kind of approach it the way I need to approach it because to understand it. And I love the concept already. If we said, okay, well, if I wanted to, because my background is in real estate, if I want to invest in real estate, I can do it kind of hands on. I can go buy a property, do it, manage it,
Mhm.
do all those things. Or I can say, no, that's too much work. I see the opportunity in real estate. I'm more interested in a private REIT. So I'm going to look into a real estate investment trust. Is your venture capital, is Champion Venture Capital along that lines where you're building a portfolio of things that are kind of catered to that sporting industry, whether that be an NFL, NHL, as you said, or any sport, collegiate even potentially, and businesses that
Mhm.
kind of feed off of that. So they're good investments because of the fan base, because of what the organization's doing, because of all the business that gets wrapped around that. Is that a kind of a high level description of what you're doing?
Yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it. And it's really more from the investor standpoint. It is really more of that passive vehicle. So we kind of see ourselves, and we'll probably dig into this more. But we've built a team of operators. We're not professional investors per se.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of our team members is an entrepreneur or operator that's been in and around that intersection of sports and business. So what we're really good at is identifying talent, identifying opportunities to grow businesses and scale businesses. And what we're doing with this investment vehicle is we're allowing people to come along for the ride as passive investors that want exposure to the whole ecosystem without having to go out and find their own individual deals, take the risk of vetting a deal and doing diligence and all of those different things. And our fund is really kind of a diversified passive investment vehicle for folks.
So, would you look at in this structure that you've got, then, Marcus, would you then be looking at local businesses, or are you looking at, now, we don't want to just do the local thing, it's got to be a national base, or it's got to cover X amount of states? Or do you really get into even the local stuff, of something that's happening in a specific state/city?
So everything that we tend to look at, we scale is big for us,
Yeah,
and partially because we want to be able to take a business. I'll give you a tangible example because I think it'll make it clear.
sure.
So we're looking at like service businesses, companies that come in and they do HVAC, or they do they're kind of components of the supply chain of like building a stadium, right? So a company like that might be local in geography now, but has a scalable service.
Yeah.
Those would be companies that are intriguing to us because one, we're able to get into a company at a really good valuation, but then we're also we're kind of building in-house deal flow for that company. So if we're able to invest in that service company that might have a local footprint now, but we're able to walk them into other stadiums and other operations and other portfolio companies, then that gives us the ability to invest in a smaller company, help it scale up,
Mhm.
so that company sees its growth, but it's also servicing the rest of the portfolio. So everything that we look at is really kind of with an ecosystem mentality tied
Love
to it.
this. Yeah, I love this concept. So, how long has CVP been kind of in operation?
So in operation for about a year. We
Yeah,
we filed paperwork right around this time last year,
yeah,
but it's been a concept that we've been kind of workshopping for 18 months, 2 years,
yeah.
and we just hit the ground running last January, and we're a year in now.
Yep. So what have you got under your belt? So if you look at AUM, how are you measuring that now? And if somebody said to you, well, what have you got going on so far? What am I investing in? Do you have a range of things that you've already got capital tied up in, or where are you at in that kind of process?
So we've got a bunch of term sheets out with companies that are pretty far down the diligence pipeline for
Yep.
us. anything from professional teams, professional sports teams, to service companies, to we've got a couple companies that are in the food and beverage space in stadium. We've got another one that is kind of a digital wallet type of technology that's in the fan engagement lane.
Yeah.
So we're looking at opportunities that kind of run the gamut.
Mm-hmm.
And really, what we've been doing for this last year is kind of building the foundation of our ecosystem.
Yeah.
So we've kind of went out and identified, domain experts in certain areas,
Mm-hmm.
so that as we go and we stand up a real estate fund, or we go in and we stand up a hospitality fund, we're as a core team are able to go out and identify the opportunities and pass it to a domain expert to actually diligence, manage the investment. So we've kind of been taking this last year to fill up the deal flow pipeline and then build our foundation as a platform.
Right.
So that in the next 6 to 8 months here, we should be ready to rock and roll.
Cool. And then you're part of the overarching team. You're part of the foundational team. You're partners with the rest of the crew. Now, you have a background in the NFL. You played in the NFL, I think, from what 2006 to when? 2016,
06 to 15. Yep,
15?
10 years.
Yeah, because it
Yep.
was like a decade of playing NFL. So, when you think about now, did you come into the NFL? Did you go to college? Did you go through that process, get drafted that way, or were you a walk on? How did you get into the NFL?
Yeah, so I went to did undergrad at a small school in New York called Hofstra University.
Yeah.
Fortunate enough to get drafted out of there after my senior year there, and was fortunate and blessed to be able to play 10 years, man, through some injuries, some trials and tribulations, but was able to put together a pretty good 10 years that I feel really good about.
Now, did you have a background? What did you come out of college with? Did you have a business background? What did you do? What got you on this path? You come out, of course, you come out of the NFL and you say, okay, well, I'm still young. I've got a life ahead of me. I need to, make a living, whatever the story is. How did you kind of go down this path?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I actually went to school. My degree is in interdisciplinary studies, which is kind of a blend of sociology, psychology. So none of this was in my background coming up. So my first real exposure to this level of business, came in my first 3 or 4 years as a professional athlete. At the time, it was kind of new and fresh, seeing athletes getting involved in the venture capital world, and I was kind of part of that first wave. So probably year 3 or 4 is when I started to look at investing in private companies. Most of them were technology companies. I tried to stay, in that intersection of sports and business, so I could, I knew what I didn't know, so I wanted to come in at least a master of the sports side, so I could kind of lessen the learning curve on the business side. And a lot of that first couple of years was just having conversations, just immersing myself into the ecosystem. Did a couple investments, and in those first couple of investments, I started to figure out that there was a real connection that I could make between my life as a professional athlete and the journey to become a professional athlete, and a lot of the entrepreneurs in the early stage companies that I was looking at and potentially investing in. I was able to kind of connect the dots between, someone that had a vision, saw an opportunity, in market, had a vision, and just went to work, kind of building it from scratch without a ton of resources. Always looking for that validation and eventually looking for that seed funding. So in my case, that seed funding came in the NFL contract, but a lot of that process really made a whole lot of sense to me because it was a life that I was accustomed to, kind of trying to put myself in position to get drafted. And when I was able to make that connection, it kind of opened up the world to me in a different way. And I started to feel like less of an outsider, and it allowed me to kind of move in a way that allowed me to kind of let my guard down and really get the full experience and really dive in and learn, in a bunch of different areas.
So when you look at, your journey to where you got this, were you one of the initial, I got an idea, I want to bring this, like, here's some things that I see opportunity, Were you one of the founder initiators of the concept?
CVP?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is something that it really stems from, I'll call it the last 15 years of just being in and around the business ecosystem.
Yeah.
All right. So I started as an early stage investor, and that quickly turned into advising companies and consulting with companies. And as I got going, I was always someone that I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm somebody that I'm going to dive into opportunities and learn them for myself. Because one thing that I realized, pretty early on was that if I just kind of stayed in the box that everyone expected me to be in, the opportunities were always going to look and feel a certain way. Like I was always going to be endorsing a product. I was always going to be a brand ambassador. I was always going to be front facing, but never really getting into the the meat and potatoes of how the business runs, how the business operates. And I'm just my brain is just not wired that way to just be in front of a product and not know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the ability to dig in, one, it gave me kind of a roadmap to try to figure out what are my skill sets outside of the game.
Yeah.
What are the things that I'm good at? What are the things that I need to learn to become better at? But it also gave me a lot of autonomy in kind of creating the roles that I wanted for myself, as opposed to just being stuck in that mascot brand ambassador role.
Mm-hmm. Now, like football, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about the team that you surround yourself with, and of course, what, NFL, any professional sport certainly opens up the door to, business talent as well. You get to meet some pretty significant people in the business world. Was that part of your strategy in building this out, to surround yourself with some real talent in terms of the business model, if you will, and the talent that it takes to do something like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that you hit the nail on the head. Coming from team sports, and what I, biased or unbiased, like to consider the greatest team sport in football, like you do realize that in order for the team to win, everyone has to be kind of moving in lockstep, and there has to be enough complementary pieces,
Mm-hmm.
For you to be able to execute the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There are no one man bands that are going to win the Super Bowls. So just kind of having that mentality and having that understanding embedded really in my experience from the time I was 7 and started playing football to the time I was 32 and stopped. That's just kind of the default way of thinking for me. And as we were looking at building out a team, a lot of, I would say at least half, if not 70% of our team played sports at a collegiate level or higher. And that's really important, just because one, we see things and we see competition, in the same vein, in that yes, we can individually excel, but if we're not able to connect the dots and connect all of these pieces in a way that kind of builds this team and builds this platform, um, you're always going to be susceptible to things that can go off the rails.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to have a team that's complementary, a team that knows how to gap fill, which I think is important with small teams, and really understands that my role is not is my role in my swim lane is not necessarily this silo that I have to operate in. More so, this is my contribution to the team's
Mm-hmm.
win, and I may cross over into other swim lanes, and each team member has to be kind of in lockstep with the strategy and be able to understand where do I need to lead versus, where are the opportunities that we might need to collaborate, or I might need to, kind of take more of a supportive role.
Mm-hmm.
And, having former athletes as part of the team, a lot of that process has become seamless.
Well, certainly from a communication and understanding, a fundamental understanding of it, which is also play your position, be
Yep.
brilliant at it. don't
Yep.
stray outside your swim lane too far, and we'll do really well. Let's go back to some fundamental philosophy, if you don't mind, Marcus. Is that when you when you had the initial concept of CVP, what was the problem you were solving, the gap, or the problem you were seeing that you thought needed to be solved? What kind of drove the initiative, if you will? And was there, out of that, did you come with a fundamental mission, if you will? something along that line. How did that whole concept even come to be that you saw that gap?
Hmm. Yeah, like our mission as a whole is really around access. And that is something that from like as an individual, I've just kind of in the roles that I've been in these last 12 to 15 years, there's always kind of been a choke point that I've recognized in each one. you know as an early stage investor, the choke point is getting access to high quality deals,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're investing in the riskiest asset class, then your ability to succeed is a function of your ability to get in high quality deals. The access to those deals becomes a choke point. I spent a handful of years as a financial advisor, advising athletes and entertainers. And the choke point that you recognize there is that the key to building long-term and sustainable wealth is a diversified portfolio, right?
Yeah.
The challenge becomes the traditional financial advisor relationship is one that only deals in stocks and bonds.
Mm-hmm.
And if a lot of the wealth is accumulated and earned outside of the traditional market, I have an advisor that's sitting here getting paid off of a fee off of the AUM, off the money that they're managing for me. They have no motivation to go look at private deals that they're not going to get paid on. Like a lot of these different experiences that I just went through, either as a client, as a practitioner, as an entrepreneur myself, you start to kind of recognize where these choke points are. And the theme that I quickly recognize is a lot of it stems from access either to deal flow or access to information and education.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started to build the CVP platform, those are the things that we put at the core and started to build the platform and the strategy around those things. And ultimately, the end result is a platform that, on the surface level, we do very similar things to other private equity firms and other venture capital firms, but the way that we do it is what's different. Who we're doing it for is what's different. Our platform is really a vehicle to drive meaningful ownership and access to a broader pool of investors, not just the same 1%, that get access to the high quality deals and the team and the league ownership deals. So that access piece is really core to our mission and our vision, and a lot of the strategy and the way that we execute it is kind of built into that.
So do you have I love this concept, by the way. So when you look at who you're serving, if, first point is, okay, well, do I have to have $100,000 to invest or $5,000? What's my point of entry?
So in one of our vehicles, like remember I talked about kind of building the foundation and building the ecosystem out.
Yeah.
One of the vehicles is what's called an Evergreen fund that allows both accredited and non-accredited investors to invest. And the reason that that's important is, just looking at the athlete community, a professional athlete might start out as an accredited investor, and then over time after retirement, because it's just really hard to replace that income. I don't care who you are,
Yeah.
it's really hard to replace that income, in a second act.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see a lot of professional athletes go from accredited investor status and kind of slowly drift into non-accredited status. And in seeing that, you start to lose access to a lot of these opportunities to build wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the focuses that we had with this vehicle was to make sure that we could work with a broader pool of investors, to where $1,000 or $5,000 that you can save, and you want to go into an investment vehicle that's not a high yield savings account or that's not the S&P 500. This is a vehicle that's now available and accessible to you. And it's really important for us, knowing that that's part of our investor base and part of our target investor base. Like, education has to be equally important, making sure that the folks that we're engaging, understand, and we're teaching them about the alternative asset class. We're teaching about the diversification. We're teaching about liquidity and risk and all of those different things.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of puts us in a position where, again, with the ecosystem mentality in mind, if we're engaging this audience, we've got to be able to educate this audience and make sure that we're creating, investors that are doing it for the right reasons, and giving them a vehicle to allow them to execute.
So in this particular model that you're building out, are you, so if I say, okay, well, I got 10 grand, I want to place it with you, am I looking at this going, this is I'm going to invest and it's going to hang out there for 5 years, 10 years, forever? What's kind of the model in that regard? Can I just and then add capital? Maybe I go, oh, this is kind of cool. Oh gosh, they're taking on more. I want to actually increase or I want to exit. Like, what's the thought processes around there that you've got set up?
Yeah. So within this fund, it's it's built around those exact questions that you just asked.
Yeah.
So again, like dealing with the non-accredited investor, dealing with somebody that this isn't throwaway money. This is money that I want to invest in. I want it to grow over time.
Mm-hmm.
We made sure that the vehicle allowed for liquidity. So there are semi-annual, what are called redemption periods, where 2 times a year, if you're an investor in this fund, you're able to go and sell your shares back either through a secondaries exchange or sell them back to the firm. Right. Because that liquidity piece is really important for this subset of investors. The other piece is we're not a traditional VC fund, in that we're taking a 2% management fee, and then we got 20% of the carried interest on profits coming back to us. There is no carried interest, and we don't really have a time frame. This is permanent capital.
Got it.
So it puts us in a mode where we don't have to try and chase quick wins. We don't have to go and hunt for unicorns. We can invest in quality businesses that have significant upside and growth potential. We can embed our expertise into these companies and help them grow at a more sustainable and higher growth pace. And we can sit in these companies as long as they're continuing to grow, right? So it puts us in a position we're not chasing unicorns. It puts the companies that we're investing in, they don't feel the heat to try to create an exit, because that's not what we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, it allows us to get in higher quality companies. It allows us to kind of reduce the volatility, and the investor at the end of the day benefits from all these things.
So let me kind of give you some thought processes that I have, given what I do outside of my podcast. One of the things that we're seeing at a global level, global macro, is certainly the devaluation of fiat currency. The U.S. continues to be, the joke is, and it's not a joke, it's just like the U.S. dollar happens to be the cleanest shirt in a dirty laundry basket, right? Like, it's everybody's devalued. Right. Now Trump is moving the needle differently, because he's going, okay, no, we're going to get rid of this debt. We're going to tariff everybody, whatever his strategy is, by the way. And I'm a bit of a Trump fan. At least I'm a fan of the team he surrounded himself with. So I'm a Canadian that's observing. But having said all that, when we look at the disruption that's happening, literally the quantitative easing that was followed that plan through the whole meltdown lockdown, we're finding that, of course, our dollar has less and less buying power. So I'm a huge fan of anybody, and I'm encouraging people to get out of fiat currency. So I look at it and say, okay, whether that be real estate or Bitcoin or precious metals or assets, and this is so fundamental to me that so many people don't understand this concept, is that the rich get richer because they invest in hard assets, stores of value. And that could be art or Rolex watches nowadays. It still continues to be the thing. But what you're talking about is giving people the opportunity to invest in a fund, if you will. Is that am I using the right terminology for what you're using? Okay. Where you actually own hard assets called businesses. So they're diversified in terms of, if you build this, as you build this fund, not if, but as you build this fund, you're expanding the diversity that's within that, but it gives just kind of everyday people the opportunity to invest in businesses that they would not normally have the opportunity to invest in. And you're building it around this thing called, I guess we'll call it sport. Will we call it specifically NFL or just sport in general?
It's sports in general, sports and sports adjacent.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Got it.
to your point, I agree with everything you just said. Just in terms of the shift, and I think that's part of the reason. If you look at kind of the global, the macroeconomic landscape of where investors are going, you're seeing a lot more of these Main Street firms focus more and more on these alternatives.
Mm,
And for us being in sports, it's more than just a passion play. It's shown over time that sports is as resilient as you can get to economic conditions,
yes.
right? These teams, the NFL is going to play.
Yeah.
People going to consume.
Yeah.
People going to buy tickets.
Yeah.
Same with NBA, MLB. Like sports is one of the truly resilient industries that if you can get in, there's an opportunity that you can kind of create this uninterrupted cash flow, for lack of a better word to put it, way to put it, right? Because if you kind of break down the business of these sports, a lot of it is driven on these long-term media deals, and that's how the valuations are jumping through the roof, because you have this sustainable revenue stream for the next 10 years. It's easy to value that.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're taking a lot of sports because it is a passion play. It is a thing that connects people. It's a thing that people understand. It's a thing that people consume. That makes it less. Intimidating as an investment vehicle. But we definitely understand that resilience and the ability to be in alternative assets that don't correlate with the S&P, that don't correlate with these traditional financial metrics that are shifting and changing by the day. We absolutely see that and realize that that's part of our strategy.
Is it fair to say, and I want to go back to this just so it's really clear that part of this was really to serve, and I'm going to use the term the common man, those individuals that would not normally have the opportunity. Now they have the opportunity. They don't need millions of dollars to get into this particular venture, but they can still get into it. And so when where was I going to go with this? I guess the question is that within the context, and I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent. I think it was years ago, that an NHL friend of mine actually bought a franchise through Interstate Battery. And the reason, and Interstate was actually formed by, I believe, an NFL player many years ago who was seeing that the players were coming through. They're making millions of dollars, to your point. They're making big money, but they came out of it. They spent it. They didn't know how to manage it. They were just in the moment of, okay, I've got all this money, I'll spend it. They come out the other side of it, and they're now what? Number one, do they have any money left? Number two is, how do we continue to thrive given that, I'm 30 some years old and I got a whole lifetime ahead of me? And they opened up the door for that opportunity within Interstate. Now, I just don't know if that's still what Interstate is doing, but ultimately, the reason I kind of go off on that tangent is that when you look at CVP, is that also part of your opportunity or your goal is to support other players in the league to say, guys, you're going to have money, you're going to make a lot of money. What are you doing with it into the future? And what are you doing into the future? So, arguably, I guess you might have some NFL player that that has, he's playing football. In the meantime, he's building a great business that serves the industry in some way. And you go, gosh, why don't we add you to this portfolio? So I've said a lot there, I think. Am I in line with your thinking, Marcus?
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's just it's second nature. Just to support the community that I come from. And it's what's interesting is that it's not just an investment play either. It's because of where we frequent. It's an opportunity. It's almost another entry point for players and athletes that want to get into the business world and don't want to go and become coaches, or they don't want to go and become scouts, and they don't want to get in line to become sports broadcasters, because those are really the three roles that are reserved for athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And anything outside of that, you're looked at as an outlier.
Right.
And what we provide, again, with the ecosystem mentality in mind, is as we're investing in these companies that are in sports, there are going to be opportunities for players to get involved if they want. There's going to be internship opportunities. There's going to be hiring opportunities. There are more and more athletes that are becoming creators and entrepreneurs. The dream scenario would be to be able to invest in an athlete-led company and grow it and scale it. So the ecosystem itself presents these natural entry points that are just different than the traditional ones that the world's going to open up for athletes. So we are absolutely mindful of that, and absolutely, again, it's part of it's on the front of our brain as we're thinking about building this thing out and scaling it.
So do you have an OM, an offering memorandum that you have in place? Like what's the, if I say, well, gosh, this sounds all really interesting. I want to know more. What would I look at an offering memorandum, or what is the kind of the dynamics of how you position it and saying, okay, read this document?
Yeah. So the from which perspective? From you as an individual,
Well,
or just kind
anybody,
of
if
still talking
somebody's
about that?
listening to this and go, this is really interesting, where do I
Mhm.
find out more? I would like to kind of insert that now and go, okay, well, no, just,
Gotcha.
reach out. We'll send you whatever documentation that you need to review before you invest.
Gotcha. So right now we are literally in the process of spinning up that Evergreen fund that I mentioned earlier,
Okay.
and hopefully within the next week or 2 weeks
Yep.
we should have our landing page up, and we will be able to take people that are interested in investing, and they'll be able to join our waiting list. And what that will do is it gets you in our queue. It will be able to keep you updated with things as they're coming down the pike, updates. We're in conversation back and forth with all the powers that be to make sure that we stay in compliance and all of those
Yeah.
things. But for right now, people in the next week or two should be able to join our waiting list and just continue to get information and updates as we are getting ready to come online.
I love it. So let's go back. I want to talk a little bit about you. I mean, you had an NFL career, you get into business, you go to school to learn what you learn. And here you are today, with a startup and a big vision. Take me back a little bit, when you're a kid growing up. I mean, to get into a business venture, were your parents entrepreneurial? Like how did where do you get this entrepreneurial spirit from? And so growing up, where did that all start, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my parents. I give a lot of the entrepreneurial spirit that came from my dad. He was someone who was what I like to call a Renaissance man. He owned businesses. He was in the construction business and real estate. He was kind of like the community dad. He was the coach for everyone in every sport. So just having the ability to see him create was different, and it kind of planted a seed in that anything that he wanted to do, I saw him go out and create it with his hands.
Mm.
And in just growing up in that environment and seeing that, and being on some of the site projects with him, and whether it was cleaning up trash or helping with the construction and all of those different things, he was a very hands-on person, and he made every opportunity for us to get hands-on with him and kind of join in. And that was huge for me, just seeing something that just seeing him create something from scratch is I think a seed that got planted in me. And you know the business side of it I didn't get exposure to until I got into the NFL, and I was able to get access to some capital. But those seeds were planted really, really early on in my childhood, just seeing him create from the ground up. And when I got my opportunity to engage, I wasn't. It's just not in my nature to be passive. It's not in my nature to cut a check and say, "Hey, I'll see you in 5 years. Just make sure my K1s hit on time." So I was always somebody. If I was going to invest my capital, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and invest my time, effort, and energy, not just to help the venture move forward, but so that I'm a more informed investor and I'm learning as I go. And a lot of that stems from watching him.
So that's great. Now, when you go into the NFL, and certainly, I'm sure there's lots of stories about getting there and all the things that you do. did you go into the NFL knowing and thinking about, my career at some point is going to end, and I have a vision of what that might be into the future, whether it be CVP or not, regardless. Did you go into the NFL knowing that, of course, you're going to get as many years as you can, you're going to make as much money as you can in that window of time, and then you were already thinking about, but at some point I'm going to exit, and although I'm not suggesting that you were obsessed on that, you were obsessed in playing football. Was there somewhere out there that you're going, when this is over, I know it's going to end, and I'm going to do something in business? Was that already in your mind when you got into the NFL?
Nope.
No.
No.
So even you had your entrepreneurial
Yeah.
accident or your entrepreneurial awakening.
Yeah. No, I was laser focused on just being a great player going in. Like in a lot of my situation, getting drafted when I got drafted. So I was a 7th round pick, which is the last round of the NFL draft. I was literally the 4th to the last pick of the entire draft. So, in that process, every single round that passes, you're getting humbled a little bit more and more. And at some point, you're a fool if you don't understand that the odds exist. So the odds of me making a roster were probably like 1% at that point, just based on where I got drafted. So you're a fool if you don't understand the odds. I just didn't want to listen to the odds. So I went in laser focused on making the roster and becoming a great player. But that entry point was always in the back of my mind, because the exit door, my journey started with the exit door way closer than I wanted it to be. Right.
That's an interesting
So it was always in the
perspective.
back of my mind. But those first couple of years, I was just so laser focused on creating value on the field, because I realized that if I create value here first, that's the launch pad to do everything else. And I didn't know anything about what off the field could look like. I didn't care about business. I didn't care about marketing deals, any of that stuff. I wanted to be a great player first, because I knew if I did that, it would open up all the other doors that I needed.
So, and of course, you're going to bring that work ethic to what you're doing today. And that's kind of just how you're wired now. It's how you've trained yourself. That's the mindset that goes into doing that. So, just a kind of a question is that, when we go back to, the comment around interstate battery, because somebody, and I don't remember who the original founder was, it doesn't really matter. But the point of it is, that was your observation as well, or has it been over the years, that NFL players come in, they get caught in the big money, but they're not planning for the future? Is that a thing? Do you see it as a problem? I hear different stories, whether it be NFL, NBA, it doesn't matter, any professional sport, I guess. I've seen it over the years in the NHL. What's your experience with that?
It's a touchy one, because I always go back to this, right? It's the place where people are shining a light on it. But I always ask this question: if you at 21 or 22 years old won the lottery and overnight had access to millions of dollars, your decision making process is not going to be the best. Right? So when you're someone that doesn't come from that type of wealth, doesn't come from that type of money, probably doesn't understand even the role of managing that money, doesn't understand the role of what that looks like, you're kind of at the mercy of, trying to make decisions based off of gut and instinct, and then truly trusting your financial advisor that you're hiring. Which, if the situation is anything like mine, I had no idea what a financial advisor did until I had to hire one. It's not really the best way to vet somebody. Right. So the light always gets shined on the player and the behaviors, but there's really a whole ecosystem that is faulty at its best is faulty. So I think over time you've seen less and less of those stories, as the horror stories of the 80s and early 90s have kind of come to surface. I think this generation has seen a lot of those and learned some of those lessons. And the challenge becomes the what used to be the old restaurant or the old car wash, like the old anecdotes of where the money goes to die. Those types of businesses don't exist anymore, but it's kind of shifted into venture, and it's shifted into these other, investment vehicles that just have more layers and more compliance and more people that can get their hands on your money.
Mm.
And when you, it's a similar conversation. It's changed, but the thing that has always been in the middle are the people that, you know, create a skill set in extracting money from young people.
Mm.
That will never go away.
Yeah, it would be nice to live into or believe that, the benchmark for how agents are qualified or how they're referred and or financial advisors, that bar has been raised. But it sounds like maybe it has, maybe not so much. I think that, you make it such a great point, is that the expectations of athletes, because they're athletes, and you know, I've just worked with too many professional athletes over the years to, you add a really, really important perspective, which is they're just kids, and I often look at professional sports and I see how people idolize individuals, but they idolize them. And it's like all of a sudden their opinions about politics or their opinions about what's going on in the world matter. No, actually, they're 23 years old. They're really good at this sport. Just if
Yeah.
you're going to put them on a pedestal, they're just really good players. It doesn't mean they're worldly or that they know what the hell they're talking about when it comes to anything else. That's the first part of it. But the understanding of just how much money is involved and what that attracts in terms of, individuals who are probably don't have the best interest of the player. I mean, gosh, how do you protect that? What? So it's good to see somebody like yourself come out and kind of start to say, well, no, we've got this thing. This is an opportunity for players. It's an opportunity for the general public, common man, so to speak. I don't know where I'm going with that, but am I kind of opening the door to some of the things that you've seen and maybe even some of the problems that you potentially will solve with CVP?
Yeah, absolutely. Like these are all firsthand problems firsthand challenges that I've gone through and witnessed on both sides of the spectrum as a player, as an entrepreneur, as an investor, as a financial advisor. Like that was one of the reasons I got I went and got my licenses, was, just seeing how many advisors are just kind of coasting on AUM fees, and not really educating, they're just very comfortable being in a spot where their client is fully dependent on them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons I got into the industry, only to realize that, compliance only allows you to do so much.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So there's this whole ecosystem that kind of has to be deconstructed. And in a lot of ways, CVP is a piece of the puzzle. And we feel like we built a piece that has a lot of answers. But it's a landscape that continues to change, right? If you're looking at what's happening in college sports, everything that we've talked about today around the challenges around athletes and finance and where the holes in the boat are, all of that has just gotten moved up 4 more years, right? So now you got 18-year-olds dealing with this. So, there's some challenges that are embedded in the, just in the ecosystem as a whole. And, we're just trying to do our small part to make sure that we're creating a vehicle that folks can benefit from and create value from, but making sure that we educate at the same time, so that my goal, my selfish goal is that, as players, come into, good situations financially, by the time that they leave, they're no longer fully dependent. Their financial advisor is truly an advisor. There's somebody that you can bounce questions off of. You understand your portfolio. You understand where your money's going. You understand where it's at. You have a strategy that you're pulling together, and you have advisors that are helping you execute, not full service bankers that do everything from soup to nuts, pay bills. And when you get into any situation that you're in, I don't care who you are, and you're solely dependent on one person for your livelihood, there's a risk there that you just don't want.
So, Marcus, I'm gonna ask you a question. It's actually a bit of a two-part question, and because I know that we're winding down in terms of your time, and that's all good, by the way. But I would like to know, so I know that in a team and in an industry, the NFL is like many professional sport, it's as big as it is, it's small. Like people know, other players, you've played with other players, they come, they go. There's always this transition. Were
Mhm.
you on the same team for your whole career?
Yeah, so I
Okay,
played with the New Orleans Saints all 10. Yep.
yeah, okay, great. So I'll kind of phrase it this way. So Marcus, when you look, you're still a young man, you're now into the business world. And if I walked into your dressing room and you weren't there, and I'm going, who was Marcus? They would have a story. There would be all sorts of stories about who you were as a player, who you are as a man, who you are as a teammate. Who do you want to be known for as you go forward? Like if in 10 years from now somebody brings up Marcus, and what do you want them to say about you in the world of business?
I think first and foremost, somebody that operated with integrity, with the team win in mind, with every move, and someone that consistently showed up. I mean, those three things, like those were the kind of the hallmarks that I tried to build my career on.
Hmm.
And that's one of the reasons I was able to stay in one place for 10 years is those three pillars. And um those are the same three that I carry into the business world with me. Like if you can say I operate with integrity, with the team win in mind, and I'm consistently showing up, then I'm good to go.
So you're the pointy end of the spear with CVC or CVP. What do you go? Champion Venture Capital or Champion Venture Partners?
Partners. Partners,
Partners.
yep.
Okay. So I don't know Marcus. I just know Capital Venture Partners. I'm a client. And I'm going to spread the word because I have an experience in 10 years from now. What do you want to hear from your clients? What do you want them to say about CVP?
I would say really the same three pillars. I think if people that engage with CVP, invest with CVP, partner with CVP, if they can walk away saying that this is a firm that operated with integrity, they did exactly what they said they were going to do. They created access and were aligned with a global win. Um, that's really what we want to be. We don't need to be in the limelight. We don't need to be celebrated. We need to be in position to help a more diverse investor base get access to quality deals and build wealth.
Love it.
That is our sole purpose.
Love it. Okay, so as we wind things down, and I'd like to run through a couple of just fun rapid fire questions that sometimes aren't so rapid fire, but we're going to do our best. I start with an easy one, just a warm up, kind of fun because it's always a little bit of controversy around. Are you Android or are you Apple?
I'm Apple. I'm
Your
Apple all day. The whole ecosystem.
your whole ecosystem. Okay, got it. I am as well, but I'm kind of born again Apple. I started out Android and converted, and very happy I did, by the way. So do you have a
Mhm.
favorite band, favorite genre of music that you listen to?
I'm a rap fan. Not the more recent rap. But ultimately, I love R&B. Love like 70s like Motown soul
Okay.
music.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of my go-to.
Cool. Favorite movie? Any?
Man, it's a funny one. It's a movie called The Last Dragon. I grew up watching. It was like one of my favorites growing up.
Great movie. That's the first one. That's the first time anybody's mentioned that movie. I mean, I get repeats of Shawshank Redemption and Matrix and that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. That one I've not heard before, so that's awesome. So when you look at over your learning and the things that you've got, was there a fork in the road kind of book that you read, something that you go, this is a book that really changed how I viewed the world a little bit, that you would recommend to people that because you were so excited about it? Any of that stuff show up for you?
Man, it's crazy because over the last couple of years, I've become a pretty avid reader.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back through uh, the Atomic Habits is a really good one just because
Yeah.
it's so actionable. One of the first books that I read was The Effective Executive. I think it's by Peter Drucker,
Mhm.
and it was at a time for me where I was trying to figure out how to do more, like efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. I was trying to take my calendar and I was trying to squeeze as much into it as possible. And reading that book can completely shifted my mindset and maybe kind of my bias changed towards effectiveness. Right. So what are the most impactful tasks that you can do? So I've started to kind of schedule my day around knock out the most impactful stuff first, and then whatever small, intangible things you can't get to, they're not really moving the needle like that. So it doesn't weigh on you as much. So I've gotten to a place where my calendar is a lot more effective than efficient at this point.
Do you have, I mentioned it earlier, but just in the last question, but, it kind of led me to the question, is there a fork in the road moment for you in your career, in your business, the path you went on? Like I look at my own entrepreneurial journey, I've been an entrepreneur for 40 plus years, but I can go back to the fork in the road moment where that journey began and why it began. Do you have a fork in the road that was really kind of instrumental in the direction that you went in?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, this was probably 2011 or 2012. So I was in my like fourth or fifth year, and I decided to do an executive MBA program. So I was still a current player, like right in smack dab in the middle of my career. Um, my wife was pregnant at the time with our first child, and at the same time, I'm literally running an indoor football team in my hometown in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So I took on all of these things, feeling like I'm Superman. I can do all of these things, and there was one day I'm sitting in class, and my I can't stop thinking about the stuff that I have to do with this team. And I'm sitting in class trying to learn how to operate a business while I'm literally operating a business real time.
Yeah,
And there was a light bulb moment that said, like, dude, you have the MBA experience right here. Go do it.
go do it.
And I ended up dropping out of that MBA class. And I kind of kick myself every now and again because it was one of those accelerated programs and I would have had my MBA in 18 months.
Yeah.
But the experience and the learning, the boots on the ground experience that I got running that team for 3 years, um, I could have never got that in the classroom. It would have all been conceptual in the classroom. And, getting those hands-on experiences, getting punched in the gut and actually feeling what it feels like to get punched in the gut and get back up and have to do it again.
Mhm.
That was the MBA experience that kind of catapulted the rest of my career because I figured out I can take a punch in the business world and keep on going just like I can on the field. And when I figured out that no flaw is a fatal flaw and you can learn from it, when I figured that out real time in business, as opposed to sitting behind a desk learning about a case study about somebody else doing it,
Mhm.
that changed everything for me.
It's interesting is that many years ago I had a similar, decision kind of that I had to make. Anyways, the point of it was is that, somebody I respected, when I was going through that process, and I hated school and all the rest of it. And he said to me, he goes, "I'll just tell you this." And he was a mentor, much older than I was at the time. And he just said to me, he goes, "I'll tell you this." He goes, "There are more high school dropouts that employ MBAs than there are MBAs that employ high school dropouts." And I went, "Well, that's really interesting." And he goes, something, always consider yourself going to the university of life and get in the trenches and get shit done because that's what you're going to learn. And you'll learn it way more effectively than you will, to your point, in a classroom looking at
Mhm.
case studies. And that's not to negate it. But I'm sure that even as you've gone into this new endeavor and if you've left your career, I'm sure nobody's looking at you. Okay, Marcus, do you have an MBA? Is anybody really asking you about your education? How you show up, how you occur, how you speak, your passion, your knowledge, the work that you've done, your history of work ethic to do what you've done. I mean, that is a far bigger statement in my world as a business guy than the statement of I've got an MBA. To me, it kind
Yeah.
of goes, okay, well, that's interesting. Oh, good for you. Let me see what you really know. that becomes how I look at the world. So anyways, we go off on that tangent. So I love it. Favorite swear word?
Man, I'm not supposed to have one. I got a 2-year-old.
Okay. Listen, I have guests that go, no, I don't swear. I go, are you kidding me? No, what the hell is that? No, then I always feel guilty.
They're in there. They're in there. I'm just being polite today.
Of course. Of course. So if there is a thing called God, what do you want to hear them say when you get to the gates?
Back to my 3 pillars, man. It's for me, integrity is everything. If people don't trust and take my word at face value, then what do you have? So for me, it's about doing the right things for the right reasons.
Being true to your values. Being true to your values. I love it.
Absolutely.
I love it. Okay, final question. What are you grateful for, Marques?
Man, what am I not grateful for? No, I'll say it this way, man. I'm not supposed to be where I'm at, right? The odds, the statistics, however you create statistical analysis, there is no calculation that puts me from where I came from to where I'm at. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to have gotten here, taken the path less traveled, and really an opportunity to kind of repackage my experience to help other people that started in my situation. That's what I'm most grateful for.
I love it. I'm grateful for having had the conversation today with you, Marques, and the opportunity to meet you. I love your humility and groundedness in who you are and how you define what you're doing going forward. It's been really insightful to hear some of what you've got going on. And, again, in the context of the Everyday Millionaire Podcast, if Marques can do it, we can all do it. So thanks very much for sharing your time and your stories and your energy with us today. Much appreciated.
I really appreciate you having me, man.